Christmas dinner ended when my daughter-in-law threatened to steal my grandchildren unless I handed over $17 million. What she didn't know? That money was blood money, saved for the families I destroyed as a corporate lawyer 30 years ago, including my son's family. I'm Rick Hayes, and I made my fortune finding legal loopholes that bankrupted working families. Then I adopted one of my victims' children and spent 3 decades drowning in guilt, trying to make amends with money. My son has no idea he's living with his family's destroyer. My daughter-in-law has no idea she married into blood money, and I had no idea that Christmas night would force me to choose between the family I raised and the family I killed. This story will shatter everything you think you know about family, justice, and the price of redemption. Hit subscribe, because this conversation about buried secrets and blood money is happening in families across America. Drop your state below so I know where you're experiencing this nightmare. Because what Jennifer said next didn't just threaten my family, it revealed a conspiracy 3 years in the making. The numbers spilled out at 6:45 p.m. on Christmas Day when the bank statement fell from my jacket pocket. $17.8 million. I'd been hiding those accounts for 15 years, and in one careless moment my secret was exposed. "Dad, what is this?" Ethan asked, staring at the paper. My son, the boy I'd adopted after orphaning him, was holding evidence of the money I'd saved for his biological sisters. Money that represented 30 years of guilt and the only redemption I could imagine. "It's complicated, son," I said, my hands shaking as I reached for the statement. Jennifer, his wife, leaned forward with eyes that reminded me of predators in courtrooms. $17 million, Rick? While your grandchildren are eating mac and cheese for dinner? The money isn't for... I started. "For what?" Jenny interrupted. "For hoarding while we struggle with daycare costs and student loans?" I watched my family's Christmas dinner transform into an interrogation. Ethan looked confused. The children played nearby, oblivious to the storm gathering around our table. "Rick," Jenny's voice carried that lawyer's edge I recognized from my own past. "This money could set our family up for generations." "Jennifer, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You have $17 million. We have children who deserve opportunities. The math is simple." But the math wasn't simple. Every dollar in those accounts was stained with the blood of families I'd bankrupted in 1993. Families like the Morrisons, like Ethan's biological family, like the people I'd destroyed before taking their youngest son and raising him as my own. "Share it now," Jenny said, her voice dropping to that quiet intensity that meant ultimatums were coming. "Or lose access to the grandchildren forever." The threat hit me like a physical blow. After losing my wife Margaret 4 years ago, my grandchildren were the only pure joy left in my life, and Jenny knew it. "That's not how family works," I whispered. "That's exactly how family works," she smiled. I looked at Ethan, my brilliant son who'd become a social justice lawyer specifically because I'd taught him to fight for the underdog. He had no idea he was the underdog in his own origin story. I thought about the monthly payments I'd been sending to his sisters for 14 years. Sarah in Portland, working double shifts as a nurse. Rebecca in Phoenix, struggling to support her classroom on a teacher's salary. Both of them still looking for their baby brother. Jenny was demanding money that belonged to the victims of my corporate crimes. Money I'd saved to compensate the families I'd destroyed, including hers. That's when Jenny said the words that changed everything. The next morning found me in my study at dawn, surrounded by 30 years of guilt organized into file cabinets. Case documents, private investigation reports, financial records tracking the lives I'd destroyed, and the small attempts I'd made to repair them. Ethan knocked on my door at 7 a.m. "Dad, we need to talk." I gestured to the chair across from my desk, the same chair where I'd told him bedtime stories, helped with homework, and watched him grow from a traumatized 8-year-old into a man I was proud to call my son. "Jennifer's asking questions," Ethan said. "What kind of questions?" "About your finances, your former clients, your reasons for adopting me." His social justice lawyer instincts were sharpening. "Dad, is there something you need to tell me?" I opened the file cabinet marked Personal Confidential and pulled out a folder I'd hoped never to share. Morrison vs. Westfield Corporation, 1993. Case hash 1993-4421. Ethan read the label. "What's this? The reason you don't have the family you were born into?" I watched my son's face as I explained what I'd done. How Hayes, Mitchell, and Associates had specialized in finding legal technicalities to destroy union contracts. How we'd bankrupted 200 families in a single case. How his biological father, James Morrison, had died of a heart attack after losing his job, insurance, and pension in the collapse I'd orchestrated. Your mother, Carol Morrison, died 6 months later. Car accident at 2:30 a.m., driving home from her third job because the single mother's salary wasn't enough to feed 3 children. Ethan stared at the documents. "You killed my parents." "I killed 200 families' financial security."
"Your parents were casualties of legal warfare I thought was just business. And then you adopted me. 3 years later, you'd been through 4 foster homes. Your sisters Sarah and Rebecca were placed separately. The system had scattered the Morrison family completely. I pulled out more files. Bank statements showing monthly transfers of $270,000 to Sarah Morris in Portland, another $270,000 to Rebecca Morrison in Phoenix. 14 years of anonymous support payments. You've been sending them money, Ethan said. $540,000 a year. Rent assistance, medical bills, their children's education costs, everything I could do without revealing who was sending it. Why anonymous? I met my son's eyes. Because how do you tell the daughters of a family you destroyed that you adopted their baby brother? How do you ask forgiveness for orphaning children and then raising one of them as your own? Ethan was reading through the private investigator reports Patricia Williams had compiled. Updates on his sisters' lives, their struggles, their own family's needs. "They've been looking for me," he said quietly. "Every year. Patricia says Sarah has never stopped believing you were alive somewhere. Rebecca teaches 2nd grade and tells her students stories about her missing baby brother." The phone rang. "Jennifer." "Good morning," I answered carefully. "Rick, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. I want to suggest a family meeting to discuss financial planning." "What kind of financial planning?" "The kind where families take care of each other, where grandfathers invest in their grandchildren's futures instead of carrying guilt about ancient history." I looked at Ethan, who was reading about his biological sister's current situations. Sarah, recently widowed, working overtime to support 2 teenagers. Rebecca, single mother, spending her own money on classroom supplies because the school budget was inadequate. "Jennifer, the situation is more complicated than you realize." "Money is never complicated, Rick. It's either helping your family or it's not." "And what do you consider family? The people who are actually in your life? Ethan, me, the grandchildren, the people who love you and support you and deserve your investment." After hanging up, I told Ethan about the pattern I discovered. 6 similar cases between 1990 and 1995. Hundreds of families destroyed using the same legal strategies. "This wasn't random corporate work," I said. "This was systematic wealth transfer from workers to executives." Ethan was reading employment records, bankruptcy filings, death certificates. "How many people died?" 17 documented deaths directly linked to financial stress from our cases. Heart attacks, suicides, accidents caused by exhaustion from multiple jobs. My son looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly, something worse. Disappointment. "The 17 million, he said. "Compensation, restitution, whatever word makes it feel less inadequate. For all the families? For the ones still alive and struggling, your sisters specifically, but others too." Ethan closed the Morrison file. "Jennifer doesn't know about this. Jennifer knows I was a corporate lawyer. She knows you were adopted. She's been asking very specific questions about my financial holdings and legal history." "What kind of questions?" Before I could answer, my phone rang again. This time it was Patricia Williams. "Rick, we have a problem. Jennifer has been accessing legal databases. Professional-grade background searches on you, Ethan, and the Morrison case." I felt the blood drain from my face. "How long?" 18 months. She knows everything." I looked at my son, who was watching my expression change from worry to fear. I had no idea I was about to learn who my daughter-in-law really was. Jennifer arrived for her family meeting at noon on December 26th, carrying a briefcase and wearing the smile she used when closing real estate deals. She'd arranged for the children to spend the day with her mother, ensuring privacy for what she called adult financial planning.
Rick, Ethan, she nodded to each of us. Thank you for making time for this important conversation. She set her briefcase on my coffee table and clicked it open. Inside were printed bank statements, property assessments, and documents that looked suspiciously like legal briefs. I've done some research, Jennifer said. What kind of research? Ethan asked.
Jennifer pulled out the file marked Hayes Financial Holdings, Complete Analysis. Inside were copies of accounts I'd thought were private, investment portfolios, and transaction histories going back 15 years. 17.8 million in liquid assets, she read. 2.1 million in property values. 890,000 in educational trusts for minor grandchildren. Jennifer, how did you... Professional due diligence, Rick. When family finances affect multiple generations, responsible adults do their homework. She spread more documents across the table. Screenshots of database searches, court record requests, law firm archives. Hayes, Mitchell and Associates specialized in corporate defense litigation from 1975 to 2005. Average case value, $50 million in disputed worker benefits. Average success rate, 94% corporate victory. Ethan was staring at his wife. You investigated us. I investigated financial vulnerabilities that could affect our children's security. Jennifer pulled out another document. Case hash 1993-4421, Morrison versus Westfield Corporation. Particularly interesting case, she continued. 200 families bankrupted through strategic contract voiding. Lead attorney, Richard Hayes. Outcome, complete corporate victory, worker pension funds transferred to executive compensation packages. My mouth went dry. Where did you get this? Public records, Rick. Available through legal database searches to any licensed attorney. You're not a licensed attorney, but I have access through my law firm employer. Jennifer's smile was ice cold, and I've been very thorough. She opened to a page I recognized. The Morrison family specifically named as plaintiff representatives. James Morrison, factory worker, died of heart attack 6 months post-bankruptcy. Carol Morrison, deceased in vehicle accident while working 3 jobs to support minor children. Children Sarah, Rebecca, and Ethan Morrison placed in state care after parents' deaths. Ethan looked at me with horror. She knows everything. Everything relevant to our family's financial planning, Jennifer agreed. I felt trapped in my own living room. What do you want? What I want is very simple. The money in your accounts represents 30 years of professional success, money that should be invested in the family that actually supported you during your retirement years. And the Morrison children, Jennifer shrugged, were placed in appropriate care through state agencies. One of them was fortunate enough to be adopted by you. Jennifer, I said carefully, that money was saved for specific purposes. What purposes? Compensation for the families harmed by cases I handled. Cases you won legally and ethically within the system. Cases that destroyed innocent people. Cases that represented zealous advocacy for your clients, which is exactly what lawyers are supposed to provide. I watched Jennifer reframe 30 years of guilt into professional success. The Morrison family specifically, I said. The Morrison family received appropriate state services. One child received excellent private care through adoption. The other 2 received public assistance as needed. They received anonymous financial support that I provided. Jennifer's expression didn't change. Anonymous gifts to unrelated parties, while your actual family struggles with daycare costs and student loans. Ethan stood up. Jenny, stop. Stop what? Stop advocating for our children's financial security? Stop weaponizing my adoption. Jennifer closed the briefcase and looked directly at me. Rick, I'm going to make this very simple. Transfer the money to a family trust with Ethan and me as co-trustees, or lose access to the grandchildren permanently. That's extortion. That's family planning, and you have until January 1st to decide. She stood to leave, then stopped. Oh, and Rick, I've prepared a comprehensive case study about the Morrison situation for submission to Channel 7 News, unless we reach an agreement. My worst fears were coming true. Jennifer hadn't just discovered my secrets. She was prepared to weaponize them. She had enough evidence to destroy everything. Patricia Williams arrived 20 minutes after Jennifer left, carrying the expression of someone delivering a terminal diagnosis. She'd been my private investigator for 15 years, helping me track the Morrison sisters and coordinate their anonymous support payments. Rick, we need to discuss your daughter-in-law immediately. Ethan was pacing the living room like a caged animal.
Patricia, how bad is this?
Worse than we thought. Patricia set her briefcase on the table where Jennifer's had just been. She's been systematically investigating your family for 3 years. I felt my chest tighten. 3 years? Patricia opened her files. Inside were screenshots of database searches, credit reports, legal archive access logs, all traced to Jennifer Sullivan's professional credentials. She started researching Rick Hayes in early 2021, 6 months before she supposedly met you randomly at that coffee shop, Ethan. My son stopped pacing. The coffee shop story was fake. Completely fabricated. She researched your habits, your schedule, your favorite locations. The meeting was coordinated. I sank into my chair. Jennifer hadn't fallen in love with my son. She'd hunted him. Patricia spread photographs across the table, screenshots of law firm databases, court record searches, financial background checks.
She knows about the monthly payments to Sarah and Rebecca. She's traced the anonymous accounts, identified the recipients, and documented the transfer patterns. For 3 years, I said. For 3 years. And yesterday's ultimatum wasn't improvised. She came prepared for this exact conversation. Ethan sat down hard. She planted the bank statement. The statement didn't fall from your father's pocket accidentally. I've been conducting surveillance on your house. Jennifer placed it there. The manipulation was overwhelming. Jennifer had orchestrated the entire Christmas revelation to create leverage for her ultimatum. What's her endgame? I asked. Patricia pulled out another document. Force a crisis that positions her as the reasonable party protecting family interests. If you resist, she escalates to public exposure and legal pressure. The Channel 7 news threat is real. She's already been in contact with a journalist who specializes in corporate scandal stories.
Ethan was reading through the surveillance reports. How deep does this go? Deep enough that she's contacted a family attorney about grandparent visitation rights, prepared ethics complaints against both your legal careers, and researched bankruptcy options for financial pressure. She's been planning a multi-front attack, I said. For months. The ultimatum about grandchildren access wasn't emotional blackmail, it was calculated leverage based on psychological profiling. My phone rang. Jennifer. Rick, I hope you've had time to consider our conversation. I'm still processing the information. Time is limited. Family financial planning requires decisive action. I looked at Patricia and Ethan. Jennifer, can you explain why you've been researching my legal history for 3 years? Silence. Patricia Williams has documented your database searches going back to 2021. When Jennifer spoke again, her voice had changed. The pretense of concerned family member was gone. Professional due diligence, Rick. When you marry into a family with complex financial holdings, responsible adults investigate potential liabilities. Such as unresolved legal obligations to parties who might claim damages from your corporate practice. The admission was clear. Jennifer hadn't discovered the Morrison connection accidentally. She'd been building a case. And when you discovered those potential liabilities, I developed strategies to protect our family's interests. By threatening to expose my past unless I transferred the money to you. By advocating for proper legal documentation of family financial responsibilities. Ethan grabbed the phone. Jenny, you researched my adoption to find financial leverage. I researched our family's legal vulnerabilities to protect our children's inheritance rights. You targeted me. I fell in love with you. The research was practical planning for our future together. When did you first contact that Channel 7 journalist? Another pause. Media consultation is standard practice for complex legal situations. I took the phone back. Jennifer, what would constitute a resolution that doesn't involve public exposure? Transfer of assets to proper family trust management, legal documentation protecting your actual family's interests, and termination of anonymous payments to unrelated parties. The Morrison sisters aren't unrelated parties. They're not legal family. Patricia was furiously taking notes. Jennifer's admissions were creating a clear pattern of extortion. I need time to consider the options, I said. You have until January 1st. After that, I proceed with legal remediation and public interest reporting. After hanging up, Patricia closed her notebook. Rick, she just confessed to extortion on a recorded line. You were recording? I've been recording all calls involving Jennifer for 6 months. Legal wire consent under Colorado law. Ethan looked between us. What does this mean? It means Jennifer made a tactical error. She revealed her timeline, her methods, and her leverage strategy. I stood up and walked to my window. Outside, Christmas decorations still hung on houses where families were probably arguing about money and responsibility and who deserved what. Patricia, I need you to contact Sarah and Rebecca Morrison. To warn them about Jennifer? To invite them to Denver. It's time for a family reunion. These documents will change how you see everything. I spent the next 3 days reviewing case hash 1993, 4421, like a man preparing for Judgment Day. Because maybe I was. The Morrison versus. Westfield Corporation file contained 847 pages, documenting the systematic destruction of 200 families. But reading it now, 30 years later, I saw patterns that my younger self had missed, or chosen to ignore. Westfield Corporation hadn't hired Hayes, Mitchell, and Associates for random labor disputes. They'd retained us specifically to eliminate worker pension obligations before a planned corporate restructuring. The bankruptcy wasn't economic necessity, it was strategic asset transfer. We weren't just lawyers, I said aloud to my empty study. We were thieves in suits. I pulled employment records, medical documents, death certificates. The pattern was devastating. Within 18 months of our legal victory, 47 worker families had experienced catastrophic outcomes. Lost homes, medical bankruptcies, divorces, deaths. My phone rang. Sarah Morrison. Mr. Hayes? Her voice was hesitant. Sarah, thank you for taking my call. Patricia Williams said you wanted to meet. About Ethan. I'd asked Patricia to make contact to explain carefully that their baby brother was alive and that his adoptive father needed to confess something terrible. He's been my son for 30 years, but before that, he was yours. We never stopped looking for him. I know. Patricia told me. About the missing person reports, the social services inquiries, the hope you've carried. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Mr. Hayes, why are you calling now? Because Ethan's marriage is in crisis, and the crisis is connected to what I did to your family in 1993. You knew our parents? I closed my eyes. Sarah, I was the lawyer who bankrupted your father's company. Silence. I was the lead attorney who found legal technicalities to void his union contract and eliminate his pension. Your parents died because of financial stress that I created. I heard Sarah breathing on the other end of the line. You killed them. Yes. Legally, ethically within the system, but practically, yes. And then you adopted their son. 3 years later, from guilt initially, but Sarah, from the moment Ethan walked into my house, scared and brilliant and angry, it became love. You adopted our brother out of guilt? I adopted your brother to save him from the system that was failing him. But I kept him because I loved him. Sarah was crying. We looked everywhere. We never knew what happened to him. He became a social justice lawyer. He fights for families like yours used to be. He has 2 children and a wife who... I stopped. A wife who's discovered our connection and is using it for blackmail. Blackmail? I explained Jennifer's research, her ultimatum about the money, her threats to expose the adoption connection publicly. She wants the compensation money I've been saving for victims of cases like your families. You saved money for us? $17.8 million. Restitution for what I stole from worker families. How much have you already sent us? I read from Patricia's records. $7.5 million over 14 years. Anonymous payments through intermediary accounts. Sarah's voice broke. The medical bills for Rebecca's daughter. The rent assistance when I was between jobs. The education fund for my boys. That was me, trying to return what I'd stolen. We thought it was a charity program. It was personal responsibility. Sarah was quiet for several minutes. Mr. Hayes, what do you want from me? I want you to meet your brother. I want you to understand that I tried to raise him with the values your parents would have wanted. And I want you to help me protect him from a woman who's willing to destroy our family to steal money that belongs to you. The money belongs to us. The money belongs to the victims of corporate legal abuse. You, Rebecca, and the other families we destroyed. Not to Ethan. Ethan has been my gift to myself. The family I didn't deserve but got to love anyway. My phone beeped with another call. Rebecca Morrison. Sarah, can you hold on? Your sister's calling." I connected the call and spent 45 minutes explaining to Rebecca the same terrible history I'd just shared with Sarah. Her reaction was different, angrier. "You stole our brother. I saved your brother from a system that was failing him. After you created the conditions that put him in that system. Yes. And now his wife wants to steal money you saved for us. Money I owe you for what I destroyed." Rebecca was quiet. "Mr. Hayes, what does Ethan know? He knows I bankrupted your family. He knows about the money. He knows Jennifer has been manipulating him for years. Does he know we've been looking for him? He does now. Does he want to see us?" I thought about my son's face when he'd read about his sister's lives. The mixture of grief and hope and guilt. "He wants to know who he would have been if I hadn't destroyed his first family." "He would have been loved," Sarah said on the other line, "by parents who worked hard and treated people fairly and taught their children to care about justice." "He is those things," I said. "Maybe because of your parents' influence through blood, or maybe because I tried to honor their memory by raising him right." Rebecca's voice softened slightly. "You really love him? More than my own life? Then help us save him from this woman?" I looked at the case files spread across my desk. 30 years of evidence documenting legal crimes that had destroyed hundreds of families. "Rebecca, Sarah, I need to ask something difficult. Are you willing to come to Denver? To meet Ethan and help me fight Jennifer's blackmail attempt?" The sisters spoke to each other for several minutes. "Mr. Hayes," Sarah said finally, "we'll be there tomorrow." "Thank you." "But we're not doing this for you. We're doing this for our brother, and for the families who are still suffering from what you did." "I understand." After hanging up, I called Patricia Williams. "The Morrison sisters are coming to Denver. Jennifer's going to escalate when she realizes her leverage is disappearing." "How far do you think she'll go?" "As far as it takes. She's invested 3 years in this plan. I thought about my grandchildren, about Ethan's career, about the Morrison family reunion that was 30 years overdue. The plaintiff's name made my blood freeze. Sarah and Rebecca Morrison arrived at my house on December 28th, looking like ghosts returning to haunt me. Sarah was taller than I'd expected, wearing hospital scrubs and carrying exhaustion like a physical weight. Rebecca was smaller, with paint under her fingernails and the focused intensity of a teacher who'd spent Christmas break grading papers. They stood on my front porch for a full minute before ringing the doorbell. "Mr. Hayes!" Sarah's voice was carefully controlled. "Sarah, Rebecca." I opened the door wider. "Please come in." They stepped into the house where their brother had grown up, looking around like they were visiting a crime scene, which, in a way, they were. "Where is he?" Rebecca asked. "Upstairs. He's nervous." I called for Ethan. When he appeared at the top of the stairs, all 3 Morrison children froze. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. "You look exactly like Dad." Ethan walked downstairs slowly. Rebecca started crying. "Ethan, is it really you?" They embraced in my living room, and I watched 30 years of separation collapse into sobs and recognition, and the kind of family connection I'd stolen from them as children. "We never stopped looking," Rebecca said through tears. "Never stopped hoping you were alive somewhere." "I didn't know you were looking," Ethan admitted. "I didn't know anything was real." Sarah pulled back to study his face. "Everything was real. Mom and Dad, the house on Maple Street, the way Dad taught you to play chess. Do you remember any of it?" "Fragments. Images that felt like dreams. Not dreams. Memories." I stood apart, watching my son reconnect with his biological family, while carrying the knowledge that I was responsible for their separation. "We need to talk," Rebecca said, looking at me. "All of us. About what happened. About what's happening now." We sat in my living room, the room where I'd helped Ethan with homework, where we'd watched baseball games, where I'd tried to be the father his parents should have been able to be. Sarah spoke first. "Ethan, tell us about this woman." Ethan explained Jennifer's research, her ultimatum, her threats about the grandchildren and media exposure. "She's been manipulating me for 3 years," he said. "Everything about our relationship was calculated." "Including the marriage?" Rebecca asked. "Including the marriage." Sarah looked at me. "And the money she wants?" I opened the files Patricia had prepared. Financial records, transfer documentation, recipient verification. "Compensation fund,"
$17.8 million saved from my law practice profits over 30 years. For families you destroyed. For families I harmed. Specifically for the Morrison family, but others too. Rebecca studied the bank statements. You've been sending us money for 14 years. Anonymous support through intermediary accounts, medical bills, rent assistance, education costs for your children. We thought it was from a charity. It was from guilt. Sarah leaned forward. Mr. Hayes, I need to understand something. When you adopted Ethan, was it love or guilt? I'd been dreading this question for 30 years. It started as guilt, pure guilt. I saw an 8-year-old boy in the system, damaged by circumstances I'd created, and I thought adopting him might balance some cosmic scale. And then he called me Dad for the first time, and I realized I'd been given a gift I didn't deserve, the chance to raise a good man, to teach him values his parents would have wanted him to learn. Ethan was watching me carefully. Did you ever think about finding my sisters? Every day. But how do you call two women and say, I destroyed your family, but I'm raising your brother well? How do you ask forgiveness for orphaning children? By telling the truth, Rebecca said simply. My phone rang. Jennifer. Rick, I hope you're having a productive day considering our conversation. I looked at Sarah and Rebecca, then at my son. Jennifer, I want you to meet some people. Can you come over? I'm at my mother's house with the children. We're discussing the grandchildren's future educational needs. I think this is relevant to that discussion. What kind of people? I met Ethan's eyes. Sarah and Rebecca Morrison, Ethan's biological sisters. The phone went silent. What did you say? Ethan's sisters are here. They've been looking for him for 30 years. That's impossible. They're sitting in my living room. Another long pause. I'm coming over. Jennifer, I'm coming over right now. Don't discuss anything important until I arrive. She hung up. Rebecca looked at me. She's afraid. She should be. Her entire leverage strategy was based on controlling the narrative about Ethan's past. Sarah stood up. What's our strategy when she gets here? I thought about the recordings Patricia had made, about Jennifer's admissions of research and manipulation, about the evidence of systematic targeting. Tell the truth. Let her react. Document everything. Ethan was holding Rebecca's hand. I can't believe you're here. We're here because we love you. Because you're our baby brother, because family doesn't abandon family. Even after 30 years, especially after 30 years. We heard a car door slam in my driveway. That's her, Ethan said. Jennifer walked into my house like she owned it, carrying herself with the confidence of someone who'd been planning this confrontation for years. So, she said, looking at Sarah and Rebecca, the mysterious Morrison sisters. How convenient that you've appeared just as family financial planning becomes necessary. Sarah stood up. Ma'am, we're here to meet our brother. Your brother has been well cared for by his actual family for 30 years. His actual family is dead, Rebecca said quietly. We're what's left of his blood family. Jennifer smiled the cold smile I'd learned to fear. And what do you want from Rick's money? We want nothing, Sarah said. We want our brother to know he was loved before Mr. Hayes destroyed our family. And now that you've delivered that message, you can return to your lives. The calculation in Jennifer's voice was unmistakable. She was trying to minimize the sisters' influence. Actually, Rebecca said, we're staying in Denver until we figure out how to help our brother. Jennifer's expression shifted to something darker. That's when I knew exactly what kind of woman my son had married. Son, you have 2 living sisters. Jennifer studied Sarah and Rebecca like a prosecutor evaluating witnesses. Her legal instincts were calculating angles, looking for weaknesses to exploit. How did you find Ethan? She asked. Patricia Williams contacted us, Sarah said. She explained that our brother was alive and that his adoptive father wanted to arrange a reunion. After 30 years of separation, a private investigator just calls you about a family reunion? That doesn't seem suspicious? Rebecca stepped forward. We've been searching for our brother since we aged out of foster care. Any contact would have been welcome. Searching how? Missing persons databases, social services inquiries, DNA testing through ancestry sites. We never stopped looking. Jennifer's expression changed. DNA testing? I felt my chest tighten. If the sisters had submitted DNA to ancestry databases, there would be digital records of their search efforts. evidence contradicting Jennifer's narrative that they'd only appeared when money became available. 23andMe, Ancestry DNA, Family Tree DNA, Sarah confirmed. We've been hoping for a match for 15 years. Have you matched with anyone? A few third and fourth cousins. No one close enough to help find Ethan. Jennifer pulled out her phone and started typing, probably researching whether Ethan had ever submitted DNA for testing. If he had, and if he'd matched with his sisters without following up, it would complicate her narrative about their sudden appearance.
Jennifer, Ethan said, why are you interrogating my sisters? Because I'm protecting our family from manipulation, Ethan. $17 million makes people do desperate things. They didn't know about the money until yesterday. They didn't know Rick had money. They knew he was a successful corporate lawyer who adopted their brother. Rich people always have money. Rebecca looked confused. Ma'am, we're not here for money. We're here because we found our brother. Right. After 30 years, you find him the same week his adoptive father's wealth becomes a family issue. Remarkable timing. I watched Jennifer reframe the reunion as a conspiracy. And Mr. Hayes, Jennifer continued, inviting them here just as we're discussing family financial planning. That's emotional manipulation, using Ethan's guilt about his biological family to avoid supporting his actual family. The argument was sophisticated. Jennifer was positioning herself as the rational party protecting practical interests against emotional manipulation. These women are strangers exploiting DNA connections for financial gain, she said. This reunion is Rick's attempt to guilt Ethan into supporting people who have no legal standing in our family. They're my sisters, Ethan said. They're people you don't remember claiming to be your sisters when money is involved. Sarah's voice was steady. Ma'am, what would convince you that we're here for family reasons, not financial ones? Nothing. Because there's no way to prove motivation when $17 million is at stake. Jennifer was building an unwinnable argument. Any evidence of the sisters' genuine motives could be reframed as calculated manipulation. My phone rang. Patricia Williams. Rick, you need to know something immediately. Jennifer's been in contact with Channel 7 News again. The interview is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Tomorrow? New Year's Eve. She moved up the timeline. I looked at Jennifer, who was smiling. Let me guess, she said. Patricia Williams warning you about media exposure? You moved up the interview. I accelerated the timeline because this family reunion stunt confirms everything I suspected about manipulation and financial fraud. Ethan stared at his wife. You're really going to destroy Dad's reputation on television? I'm going to protect our children's financial inheritance from systematic family manipulation. What are you going to tell Channel 7? Jennifer pulled out a prepared statement. Corporate lawyer Rick Hayes destroyed Denver families in the 1990s, then adopted one of his victims' children as a trophy. Now he's using guilt manipulation and fake family reunions to avoid his legal obligations to the family that actually raised the victim. That's completely false, Rebecca said. Prove it. Prove you're not here for money. Prove Rick didn't orchestrate this reunion to manipulate Ethan. Prove this isn't financial fraud disguised as family drama. The trap was perfect. Jennifer had created a situation where the truth looked like lie and love looked like greed. Jennifer, I said, what would it take for you to cancel the interview? Transfer of assets to proper family trust. Legal documentation establishing Ethan and me as fiduciary managers of your estate, and termination of anonymous payments to unrelated parties. The Morrison sisters aren't unrelated. They're not legal family. Ethan is legal family. Our children are legal family. These women are DNA connections with financial motivations. Sarah stood up. Ma'am, we don't want your family's money. Then sign legal waivers renouncing any claim to Rick's assets. We can't sign away rights we don't have. Then you admit you believe you have financial claims. The circular logic was maddening. Jennifer had constructed arguments that made innocence look like guilt. The interview airs tomorrow at 6 p.m., Jennifer continued, unless we reach an agreement tonight. She headed for the door, then stopped. Oh, and Rick, I've filed preliminary documentation for emergency custody evaluation. Claims that Ethan's psychological state has been compromised by family manipulation and financial stress. You what? Child Protection Services will want to evaluate whether recent family revelations and financial conflicts constitute environmental instability for the children.
I felt like the room was spinning. "You're using the grandchildren as weapons." "I'm protecting the grandchildren from adults whose priorities have become confused." After she left, the house felt like a crime scene. Patricia arrived within an hour, carrying legal documents and wearing the expression of someone preparing for war. "Rick, she's playing three-dimensional chess."
Media exposure, custody threats, and financial leverage simultaneously. Ethan was holding Rebecca's hand like an anchor. "How do we fight this?" "By changing the game," Patricia said. "Instead of defending against her attacks, we go on offense." "How?" Patricia pulled out a digital recorder. "By letting her destroy herself. Tomorrow morning, before the Channel 7 interview, we arrange one final family meeting. We let Jennifer explain her position completely, and we record everything." Sarah looked at me. "Is that legal?" "Colorado one-party consent law. As long as one party knows about recording, it's admissible evidence. I thought about my grandchildren, about Ethan's marriage, about the Morrison family reunion that was 30 years overdue." "What if she doesn't confess to anything damaging?" Patricia smiled grimly. "Rick, you've been dealing with Jennifer for 3 years. I've been watching her for 6 months. Trust me, she'll confess to everything."
She had enough evidence to destroy everything. New Year's Eve morning arrived with the weight of impending judgment. Patricia had set up recording equipment in my study, hidden microphones that would capture everything said in the room during our final family meeting. "Remember," she instructed, "let Jennifer do most of the talking. Ask simple questions that require her to explain her reasoning. Don't debate her conclusions, just get her to articulate them clearly." Ethan was holding his coffee like a lifeline. Sarah and Rebecca sat nearby, looking like people preparing for a funeral. In a way, we were. "What if this doesn't work?" Ethan asked. "Then Jennifer destroys my reputation, claims financial fraud, and potentially wins custody of your children," I said honestly. "And if it does work? Then we have evidence of extortion, manipulation, and systematic family targeting for financial gain." My phone buzzed. Text from Jennifer. "Family meeting at 10 a.m. Bringing final documentation for transfer agreements. This is your last chance for reasonable resolution." At exactly 10 o'clock, Jennifer arrived carrying a briefcase and wearing the confident expression of someone who believed she'd already won. "Good morning, everyone," she said, setting her case on my coffee table. "I hope you've had time to consider practical solutions." "We've been discussing options," I said carefully. Jennifer opened her briefcase and pulled out legal documents, trust agreements, power of attorney forms, asset transfer authorizations. "I've prepared everything necessary for orderly resolution. Rick transfers assets to family trust managed by Ethan and me. Anonymous payments to unrelated parties terminate. Family financial planning proceeds normally." She spread the papers across the table like someone dealing cards. "And the Morrison sisters?" Sarah asked. "Are welcome to pursue independent legal remedies if they believe they have legitimate claims against Rick's estate. But not through family channels? Family channels are for family members. Legal channels are for legal claimants." I activated the hidden recording system with a foot switch Patricia had installed. "Jennifer, help me understand your position clearly. What constitutes family in this situation? Blood relatives with legal standing, adoptive relationships with legal documentation, marriage relationships with shared custody responsibilities. So Ethan is family because I adopted him legally?" "Exactly. And your family because you married Ethan?" "Correct. But Sarah and Rebecca aren't family because they're biological connections without legal relationship to anyone in our current family structure. Even though they're Ethan's sisters? They're strangers who share DNA with Ethan. That's not the same thing as family." Rebecca leaned forward. "Ma'am, we raised each other after our parents died. We're not strangers. You were children 30 years ago. You're strangers now." "And the money I've been sending them?" I asked. "Unstructured charity that should be redirected to legal family obligations?" "Such as?" Jennifer pulled out financial calculations. "College funds for your actual grandchildren, investment accounts for their futures, support for the family that's actually in your life instead of DNA connections from your guilt complex. You think supporting Sarah and Rebecca is about guilt? I think supporting strangers who appeared when money became available is financial fraud disguised as family sentiment." The recording was capturing everything. Jennifer's cold calculation about human relationships, her dismissal of biological family bonds, her reduction of 30-year family separation to financial opportunism. "Jennifer," Ethan said quietly, "what if I want a relationship with my sisters regardless of money? Then you can have social contact without involving family finances. And if I want them to be part of our extended family, then you're prioritizing DNA connections over marriage vows and parental responsibilities. So I have to choose? You have to choose what's practical, emotional relationships with people who share your biology, or financial security for the people who share your daily life." Sarah stood up. "Ma'am, we never asked Ethan to choose between us and you. Your presence forces that choice." "How?" "Because every dollar Rick gives you is a dollar not invested in our children's futures." The admission was clear. Jennifer saw family relationships as zero-sum financial competitions. And if Rick wants to honor obligations to families he harmed, then he can do that after he's fulfilled obligations to families he loves. I met Patricia's eyes. She nodded slightly. We had enough. "Jennifer," I said, "what happens if I don't agree to these terms?" Jennifer smiled. "Then I proceed with protective measures for our family's interests, such as media exposure of your corporate crimes, custody evaluation for environmental stability, and legal action to protect the children's inheritance rights." I activated the recording at exactly 2:15 p.m. "Let me be completely clear about something," Jennifer continued, her confidence building. "This isn't about revenge or punishment. This is about resource allocation and family protection." I kept my voice neutral. "Explain that for me." "You have $17 million earned through corporate legal practice. That money represents the financial foundation for your actual family's security, your grandchildren's education, Ethan's professional freedom, emergency reserves for medical or crisis situations." "And the Morrison sisters are adults with their own families and responsibilities. If they believe they have legitimate claims against your estate, they can pursue those through appropriate legal channels." Sarah was watching Jennifer with the careful attention of a medical professional assessing symptoms. "Ma'am, what kind of legal claims do you think we might have?" "I have no opinion about your legal claims. I have opinions about my children's financial security." "But you mentioned we could pursue remedies." Jennifer's expression shifted slightly. "Hypothetically, if someone wanted to claim that corporate legal practice harmed their family, they could file civil suits. That's what courts are for." "Against Rick specifically?" "Against anyone they believe caused actionable harm," Rebecca spoke up. "And you think we should sue Rick instead of accepting family reconciliation?" "I think you should pursue whatever legal remedies you believe are appropriate, separate from our family's internal financial planning." The trap was becoming clear. Jennifer was encouraging the Morrison sisters to file lawsuits that would tie up estate assets in litigation, making them unavailable for family use. "Jennifer," I said, "are you suggesting that lawsuits would be preferable to voluntary compensation?" "I'm suggesting that legal claims should be handled through legal processes, not family financial planning. Even if I want to provide voluntary compensation? Even if you want to avoid the legal scrutiny that would come with formal civil litigation?" Ethan was staring at his wife. "Jenny, are you threatening to encourage lawsuits against my father?" "I'm explaining that people who believe they have legitimate legal claims shouldn't be satisfied with informal family arrangements. You're encouraging my sisters to sue Dad. I'm encouraging your DNA connections to pursue appropriate legal remedies instead of relying on family sympathy." Patricia had been right. Jennifer was revealing her strategy completely. "Help me understand the timeline," I said. "When did you first discover the Morrison case?" Jennifer hesitated for the first time. "During routine background research." "When did that research begin?" "When family financial planning became relevant. Before or after you married Ethan." "Research into family financial situations is ongoing for responsible adults." "So you were researching my financial background while you were dating my son?" "Due diligence is normal when considering marriage into families with complex professional histories." "Complex how?" "Corporate lawyers often have unresolved professional obligations, potential liabilities that could affect family financial security." Sarah leaned forward. "Ma'am, you researched our family specifically." "I researched potential financial vulnerabilities that could affect my children's inheritance." "Including the Morrison case?"
including any cases that might generate claims against Rick's estate. And when you discovered that Ethan was Morrison family? Jennifer's mask slipped completely. I discovered that Rick Hayes had adopted a child from a family he'd bankrupted in corporate litigation. That represented both potential legal vulnerability and confirmation of guilt-based financial decisions. Guilt-based decisions? Rick's been making financial choices based on emotional guilt rather than legal obligations to his actual family. Such as anonymous payments to you and your sister, $17 million saved for compensation instead of invested for grandchildren, estate planning that prioritizes strangers over family. Rebecca asked the crucial question, "Ma'am, when you discovered this connection, what did you decide to do?" I decided to protect my family's interests from systematic financial manipulation. How? By documenting Rick's guilt-based financial decisions, establishing legal frameworks for proper family asset management, and ensuring that emotional manipulation doesn't override practical family planning. And the media exposure? Is documentation of systematic financial fraud disguised as family sentiment? Ethan stood up suddenly. "Jennifer, you researched my family to find financial leverage. You married me to position yourself for this exact conversation. You've been planning to steal compensation money from victims of corporate crimes. I married you because I loved you and because I identified financial vulnerabilities that needed professional management. You targeted me. I protected our future family's interests from foreseeable legal and financial complications by manipulating me for 3 years. By managing complex family financial situations with professional competence." I looked at Sarah and Rebecca, then back at Jennifer. "Jennifer, what you've described sounds like systematic targeting of my family for financial gain. What I've described is responsible family financial planning in the face of guilt-based decision-making and emotional manipulation by DNA connections." Patricia appeared in the doorway carrying additional recording equipment. "Actually," she said, "what you've described is documented financial fraud conspiracy, systematic family targeting, and attempted extortion." Jennifer's face went white. "This conversation has been recorded under Colorado one-party consent law." "You can't." "We can. And we did." I pulled out my phone and stopped the recording app. "Jennifer Sullivan, you just confessed to research-based targeting, manipulation of family relationships for financial gain, and conspiracy to steal compensation money from victims of corporate crimes. You set me up. We documented your actual motivations and methods." Jennifer grabbed her briefcase and stood up. "This recording doesn't change anything. I still have the Channel 7 interview this afternoon." "Actually," Patricia said, "you don't." That's when she revealed her real plan. Patricia pulled out her phone and played an audio file. Jennifer's voice filled the room, crystal clear. "I researched potential financial vulnerabilities that could affect my children's inheritance. I discovered that Rick Hayes had adopted a child from a family he'd bankrupted. Rick's been making financial choices based on emotional guilt rather than legal obligations to his actual family." "Where did you get this?" Jennifer demanded. "From your phone call with the Channel 7 producer yesterday. She sent you a list of interview questions. You called back to provide clarifying information, and I recorded that call with her consent." Jennifer's face went through several expressions before settling on pure fury. "You've been monitoring my communications? I've been documenting a systematic extortion conspiracy targeting my client." "Your client?" Patricia gestured to Sarah and Rebecca. "The Morrison sisters hired me 6 months ago to document the theft of their compensation payments." I stared at Patricia. "What?" Sarah spoke quietly. "Rick, we've known about the anonymous payments for 2 years. We hired Patricia to find out where they were coming from. And what we discovered," Rebecca added, "was that someone was researching our family, tracking the payments, and planning to intercept them." "You've been investigating Jennifer?" "We've been protecting our brother from a woman who was systematically targeting him for financial exploitation." The room spun around me. The Morrison sisters hadn't just responded to my invitation for a reunion. They'd been actively investigating Jennifer's conspiracy. "How did you know?" I asked. Patricia opened another file. The anonymous payments stopped and started in patterns that correlated with Jennifer's database searches. When she accessed Morrison case records, payments would be delayed. When she researched trust fund mechanisms, payment amounts changed. Someone was interfering with the transfers. Someone was testing the system to see how to intercept them. Jennifer was backing toward the door. This is conspiracy. Yes, it is, Sarah said calmly. Your conspiracy. To steal compensation money from families your father-in-law harmed. And we have documentation of everything, Rebecca added.
Database access logs, phone records, email communications with journalists and lawyers. The Channel 7 interview, I said. Patricia smiled grimly. Has been canceled. When the producer received evidence that the story was based on fabricated information designed to cover financial fraud, she declined to proceed. Jennifer reached for her phone. I'm calling my attorney. Good idea, Patricia said, because the FBI Financial Crimes Unit will want to interview you about conspiracy to commit wire fraud across state lines. Wire fraud? The Morrison sisters live in different states. Interfering with interstate financial transfers for personal gain constitutes federal wire fraud. Sarah stood up and walked to Jennifer. Ma'am, we don't want to destroy your life. We just want our brother back and our compensation payments restored. And we want you to get help, Rebecca added, because what you've done isn't normal behavior. It's systematic predatory targeting. I was protecting my family.
You were exploiting a family, I said quietly. My family, Ethan's family, your own children. Everyone was a resource to be managed for your financial benefit. Ethan had been silent through the revelations. Now he spoke. Jenny, what you've done isn't love. It's not family protection. It's calculation and manipulation and theft. You're choosing them over me. I'm choosing truth over lies, justice over theft, family over conspiracy. Jennifer looked around the room, realizing that every alliance she thought she'd built was gone. This isn't over, she said. Yes, it is, Patricia replied. The evidence is comprehensive, the crimes are documented, and the victims are ready to testify. After Jennifer left, we sat in silence for several minutes. What happens now? I asked. Sarah took my hand. Now we figure out how to be a family, all of us. Rebecca smiled for the first time since arriving.
And we make sure 43 families get proper compensation instead of having their payments stolen by predators.
Ethan looked at me. Dad, can you forgive me for not seeing what she was doing? Son, can you forgive me for what I did to your first family? We both started crying. Justice served through love, not law. 6 months later, I stood in the Denver courthouse watching Jennifer Sullivan accept a plea agreement for attempted wire fraud and extortion. 2 years probation, restitution payments, and mandatory counseling for financial manipulation disorders. Ethan received joint custody of their children, who are slowly learning that families can be complicated but love shouldn't be conditional. The Morrison Family Foundation has grown beyond what I ever imagined. We've helped 87 families now. Families where corporate lawyers found technicalities to steal worker benefits, eliminate pension funds, or transfer family assets to executive compensation packages.
Families like mine used to destroy.
Sarah moved to Denver permanently. She's the foundation's medical advocate, helping families navigate insurance complications and medical debt that stem from corporate abuse. She lives 15 minutes from my house, and her teenagers call me Grandpa Rick while teasing me about my outdated taste in music. Rebecca visits monthly from Phoenix. Her second-grade class has adopted the foundation as their community service project, and her students write letters to families we're helping. She's teaching 7-year-olds about justice in terms they can understand. Ethan and I work together now. He handles litigation, I handle research, and together we're unwinding 30 years of corporate legal abuse. Some days we argue about strategy. Some days we cry about families we can't help fast enough. Every day we remember that redemption isn't a destination. It's a choice you make repeatedly. I'm 70 now.
I spend my time identifying corporate abuse patterns and teaching my grandchildren about the difference between legal and ethical. Sometimes I catch Madison playing chess with me, and I explain how pawns can become queens, but real power comes from protecting the pieces around you. The 17 million has grown to 32 million through careful investment and additional contributions from lawyers who discovered their own corporate crimes. Money that was stained with blood has become a source of healing for families who thought justice was impossible. Jennifer remarried a corporate lawyer. They live in a large house with a smaller heart. I never learned who I would have been if I hadn't destroyed the Morrison family. But I learned who I wanted to become.
someone who breaks cycles instead of perpetuating them, someone who chooses love over law when the law is wrong.
Sometimes redemption looks like punishment, but more often it looks like accountability applied systematically over time.
The Morrison family is whole again. Different than it would have been, but whole. Where would you want this conversation to end?